guys, and welcome back to episode 2 of the podcast. Today we have Anya on today. Thank you for being here, Anya.
Great.
How's your quarantine been?
Well, it's been pretty good. I get outside a lot, which is really good. We live in a beautiful area where we can hike a lot, so that's been good. Obviously, I miss my normal life, but it's okay.
Yes. And at Drake, you're part of peer resource, that's right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit to what goes on in peer resource and kind of what you guys do and what the main purpose of peer resource is?
I could just repeat our mission statement and all our goals, but that can get kind of boring. So, in summary, I think that our goal is just to support our peers, mentor our peers. That's all in our mission statement. But also just provide an education about some topics that are just kind of uncomfortable to talk about, like sexual health and mental health. And we, as a student group, educate people about that. So we do presentations in class. Like I'm in a presentation group about safer sex, and we teach everyone about contraception. And I'm also in a group called Healthy Relationships, and we teach people about what an unhealthy relationship looks like versus a healthy one, and the cycle of abuse. But then as a class, we also try to keep ourselves really bonded and show ourselves to be a strong, united group. So we do a lot of like intrapersonal work as well, and group bonding, which is really nice because we feel really close, and I trust everyone in that class so much.
And so with these groups, you guys, how do you form these groups? Are they people just like, oh, this is a certain something I'm more interested in, and that's kind of how it works out?
Yeah, there's a Google form, and you chose one topic that you were really interested in and wanted to share about, and one that you were kind of uncomfortable sharing about, so that you learn something while you're teaching something.
Uh-huh. And what kind of drew you to peer resource in the beginning? Is there a specific reason why, like, oh, that piece of peer resource, that's something I want to do?
I knew I wanted to be in a leadership class, so I had applied to both ASB and peer resource. Um, but in the end, I chose peer resource because it felt more like it was about the group and not just the content and the work that you're doing. Um, but I have a lot of interest in like personal issues and helping people work through personal issues. And so in the end, it was kind of like, this is an opportunity for me to help people and to learn more about myself and what I'm comfortable with.
I think it's very interesting for students to have other students be giving this information, because it's one thing to have an adult that's like, oh, this is what a relationship is supposed to be like, or this is how you have safe sex. But having it for students, it feels a lot more approachable, and like I feel like as a student, you're much more willing to listen, which is something great that I think peer resource does. Um, are there any specific like projects, or like is there anything like special thing you've done with peer resource? Is it mostly just presentations? I know you talked about other like group bonding things, but when it comes to sharing information, what else have you guys done?
We do weeks, like I don't like theme weeks. So before homecoming, we had consent week, and each day we had activities teaching about consent, and we made posters. And currently, because of the whole pandemic thing, we are working to create, I think, a presentation for incoming freshmen next year. Because normally at this time of the year, they would have opportunities to visit school, and I think ASB and peer research would have the opportunity to visit them. And because we can't really do that, we're trying to expand our social media presence so that we can give the incoming freshmen a little bit of an idea of what's happening, give them advice like what we would want to know if we had been in their shoes, and what it'll be like to come into high school, especially with all the uncertainty with like next year and whether or not we'll be at school. school for the first couple weeks.
Hmm.
We're trying to support all the younger kids. And normally at this time of year, we'd be doing more of a farewell to our seniors, but our seniors have decided that they want to put a lot of their energy into helping the new kids instead of enjoying their time as a senior, which is
Hmm.
sad, but it's also really sweet.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, so it seems like kind of quarantine's definitely changed everything. The pandemic has changed everything. The, so, like, how does that change your guys' approach to what you're doing? Because obviously you can't be in classrooms giving presentations, and it sounds like you're doing something for the freshmen. But what, like, is there like, what? How are you continuing for the rest of the students? Like, are you guys doing stuff? I'm sure you are.
Yeah, so we're doing Zoom presentations, and I did one for, I think I did a drugs presentation the other day. And this one was really important to us with Shane's death, that we wanted to approach it in a very, like, well-rounded way and not just shoving information down like kids' throats about drugs and just don't do drugs. That's not an effective method. Um, but it's very, very uncomfortable over Zoom because I would be doing a presentation and I'm sharing my screen, so I can't see anyone else's faces. And it's just like I'm talking to my computer and everyone's just dead silent. I would ask a question and no one would turn their microphones on and answer it. And it was really uncomfortable. Uh, and I don't know if everyone was listening, but we're just trying to do our best and trying to carry on as we can. And I think it's better that we're at least making an effort instead of just giving up and not doing any more presentations.
Oh, for sure. I'm glad you guys still making those presentations through Zoom. And I know I feel so bad for the people like the teachers or and you guys too, because it's like no one speaks. And the teacher's like,
No
"You
one
guys
wants to
there?" And
talk.
like, "Yeah, we're here." Um, but yeah, that's very good. And how would you say like being peer resources unique because it is like when you're talking about something like drugs, having the perspective of a teen is much different than an adult. Um, and I like in the presentations that peer resources done for my classes, also the stuff because I've experienced what peer resource done. It's doesn't seem like very commanding. It doesn't feel like this is oppressive thing. It's like more information. But how would you speak to peer resources ability to appeal to the students more than typically like an adult or like the faculty might?
I think, first of all, it's just kind of uncomfortable when you have your like older teacher trying to teach you about like a topic that maybe they aren't current with. Like drugs practices change so much, like, so having an older teacher trying to teach about like nicotine and juuling is weird because maybe they've never experienced a culture in which that's very prominent, whereas for teens we're like, yeah, people juul all the time, like, let's get this to stop. And I think they can kind of approach it in more of a way where like it's a little more understanding because we know how prominent, for example, juuling is, that we can kind of just be like, guys, it's not cool. And especially for younger kids, seeing a junior or senior saying juuling is just really bad for you, don't do it, it's kind of like, oh well, if this older kid thinks it, then maybe I should as well.
Changing kind of the society around it, like because you are part of the students. So instead of like having this outside force, it's your part of the student body, and I feel like that definitely has a more impactful change to like the system. But I'm interested how you guys approach like these topics because obviously you don't want people to be destroying or hurting their bodies with drugs, and you don't want people to be in abusive relationships. So when you go forward or other whatever you guys do, so when you're making your presentations, whatever you're doing, how do you kind of map out like what is the tone of our message going to be? Because you have to balance like, oh, we don't want this to happen, but we don't want to seem like this authoritarian voice, which teenagers tend to rebel against. So yeah, like how do you guys kind of balance those two aspects for the presentations?
So we started out this year, we had a ton of old presentations that kids have been doing for years and years, and a lot of them just seemed kind of like outdated or just like generally aesthetically not interesting in a PowerPoint. And so we kind of just like revamped everything. And that was definitely the first part, half of the year. Even the first couple weeks, we were just like scrambling to get a bunch of presentations made. Um, and so I think because we went from that shift where a lot of these old ones were just kind of boring, like it would be like a picture of a type of drug, and then the student would just be like, here's what this drug is, here's what it'll do to you. And so we work with wellness. We have once a week, we have Wellness Wednesdays, and that's when we get trainings. And so a member from wellness will come and give us the information that we need to share, and then it's up to us to craft that information into a way that'll actually be appealing to students. And so I think we're trying to aim for informative but relatable, and um, and I've talked a lot about I've talked a lot about harm reduction, and so our idea is not to tell students not to do something, but to say, if you are going to do it, here's how to do it as safe as possible.
Hmm. Definitely. And I think, yeah, having that relationship with wellness is very unique because not all schools have a wellness center. And I know it's relatively new for Drake too. So I'm sure for peer resource, that's an added bonus to have these people who are much more knowledgeable than your average person in these subjects to be able to work with that. And how do those like in those wellness Wednesdays, like how do those conversations go? Is it like your whole class is there? Do groups go with specific people? How does that work?
Yeah, so usually we try to keep it our whole class all together. And someone from wellness, sometimes they'll have a presentation for us, and it'll be like they're giving a presentation to us that we will then give a presentation to students. Um, but oftentimes we'll bring in a specific person. For example, we had a mediator come on, like she's a couples therapist and she helps people work through relationship issues, and she taught us basically how to listen, which is especially helpful with our peer mentoring program, and how to respond to other people's issues. And that was really helpful because um, although we also inform, we try to also pull the other side and try to listen to people's problems, and then use that information to craft new presentations or make new assistance for the students. So having someone come in and teach us how to listen and how to respond is really helpful, and it also just builds character. Like all the students in peer resource are now really good listeners. And that was more of a discussion instead of a lecture. And we did like one-on-one activities, pair activities. So we'd have a discussion and then break off into groups. That's usually how it goes.
Cool. Yeah, I've never heard of that. So that's well, at least the opportunity that you guys are having. So that's awesome. Um, yeah, and for the wellness, how like continuing on that strain, how much? Because wellness does other stuff. How much are you guys involved? Like coexisting? There's just a certain section of wellness. Like okay, wellness is helping us, and then we do our own thing, and they do our own thing. Or how connected is peer resource and wellness? Because they do have similar if goals, I would say.
I think that we're pretty connected and we work really closely together, but then we also have projects on the side. So wellness is super busy, they're doing amazing things, but then they reach out to peer resource and say, hey, we have this opportunity when we could be doing presentations, but we want peer resource to be doing them. So the drugs presentation, for example, was originally just going to be wellness, but after Shane died, they decided that they wanted to have kids be doing it. And because it's such a sensitive topic, it was a little scary because we're like, we're just kids. We don't really know like what we could say what we say could have major implications. And so we had heavy trainings with that. And then there are also just times when they're like, hey, we want someone to help out with they'll have wellness does presentations separate from peer resource, and they'll say we only have a couple staff members in wellness, we could use some other students to help out. And so that's more of a volunteer thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a whole class, it's just a peer resource student might volunteer to do this presentation.
Mm.
um, and then we get a lot of our information from wellness, and a lot of what we do is run by wellness before we do it. So all our presentations are checked out by a wellness staff member to make sure that it's appropriate and it's well informed, but also it doesn't have any like harmful implications.
I'm sure that's reassuring to have that voice that's like, yep, this is not going to
It's
be
okay, you're
offending
doing
anyone.
fine.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and you also mentioned earlier the peer mentoring program. I personally haven't heard of that, or like maybe I have, but can you speak more to that? Because I'm interested in what that is.
I mean, yeah, it's probably a good thing if you haven't heard of it that I'll talk about it. I think a lot of kids don't know that it exists, but I can't say it's therapy. We are not allowed to say that it's therapy or counseling, but
Hmm.
it's peer mentoring. It's you are having a student that you can confide in, and it's it's a completely confidential situation. Um, and we have back at school we had a binder where students could look through all the like profiles of the peer resource students and then fill out a form and that says, hey, I want to talk to a peer mentor, and we can talk about anything. Each peer resource student obviously comes from different backgrounds and has different experiences, and so when we wrote these profiles out we said things that we could work with, like I have personal family history with like eating disorders and alcohol abuse, and so that's something that I can talk about and I'm comfortable talking about. So if a student who is dealing with family issues surrounding those, I could be a person to reach out to because I have that specific experience. Um, and I think it it never really like got going. We tried to put it in crew announcements and PTVs, but it's still really hard to reach out and get people to understand that that's happening.
Hmm.
So next year we'll try to do that more. And right now we're doing community Zoom rooms, which I hosted once, but no one came, which can be uncomfortable because it's hard to talk about your personal issues on Zoom. It's hard to do therapy over Zoom, um, but it's still available, and it's important that we continue having it available in case anyone needs it, because if we just help one person it'll make it worth all those times when a student hosted a Zoom room and no one showed up.
Yes, and how would people like find or how would people find where to go for that if they want to do that?
It's in our Instagram bio. I I help run the social media for PR, and I just put it in, and I think I posted about it too. So there's a little poster on our Instagram that has all the information on how to do it. You have to fill out this form, uh, and then once you fill out the form with your student email address, because it's only available to Drake students for safety and legal reasons, obviously, then you'll get the Zoom link. And it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And Wednesdays and Fridays are hosted by a peer resource student.
Nice. Um, and so you just brought up that you're part of the social media um, presence of peer resource, and how does that, like, what exactly do you decide, like, oh, what goes on the peer resource? Because I feel like it's a different than like ASB. It's like, oh, these big events, like, oh, there's a dance, so we can put that up, or there's a
Yeah, obviously.
so kind of how do you decide like what goes up on the peer resource social media? What are the behind the scenes on for that?
So we have multiple group chats, and oftentimes our wonderful teacher, Miss Brown, will say like, "Hey, here's something that we want to share about." Some student brought up the other day that it was Trans Day of Visibility, and so we wanted to post about that. So I found some picture about Trans Day visibility and posted that. So that's not as much related to our school, but it's related to something that we wanted to share with the student body. And then every time we have something new, like when applications were going out, I posted a lot about that, like instructions, important dates. And right now, because there's not as much going on, we are doing story takeovers. And so a couple weeks ago, I vlogged all day long for the Pure
I think I
Resource
saw that because it was
story.
like
Yeah, I know. And so we're trying to do that like once or twice a week. We have students do that. Just kind of to remind kids like, hey, we're still here, and that like everyone's days are different. Like My day, I might have been super productive, but the day afterwards, when I wasn't vlogging, I might have stayed in bed all day and like watched Netflix. And that's not exactly something I would want to vlog. So
Yeah,
I'm lucky that the day I had happened to be one where I was productive. But we all have different days, and that's okay.
of course. Yeah, I think we've all had the day of just Netflix during this quarantine, if not a couple, and I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, yeah. So for peer resource, there's people can connect through, and the Zoom thing, is that another form of peer mentoring, or is that something kind of different? Is,
Yeah, it's kind of peer mentoring morphed into the community Zoom rooms. The community Zoom rooms are completely run by wellness, and then peer resource just hosts like guest days. We wanted to continue doing peer mentoring like one-on-one, but for legal reasons we can't. There always has to be an adult present if you're doing it on Zoom, and there were also some other concerns, whole bunch of things like um, making like being alone with a student. If that student were potentially to put themselves in danger, there's nothing that we can really do about it, and so we always have to have an adult. So
mhm.
now we have the community Zoom rooms.
And the community Zoom rooms, multiple as many, like there could be a group of people there, and like and you guys can talk about kind of whatever is on your mind. Is that kind of how it works? If it doesn't have to be something very like a dire, like, oh, I am like in this very bad place. It can be kind of whatever, just to connect with other people. Is that right?
Yeah, we wanted to create it more, make it be more of a conversation than like group therapy. Um, Again, because of the situation and because students aren't actual therapists, we wanted to emphasize that this is not exactly a time to be sharing like deep personal issues. It's more about creating a connection with other students in a time when we're all online.
And is there like wellness person on it, or is this just students for? Um,
Yeah, I believe there's always some member of wellness or Miss Brown.
is Miss Brown? Is she the physio Miss Brown? There's a lot of Miss
Yeah,
Browns. Okay, cool.
yeah,
I
yes.
like Miss
Now
Brown.
she's the peer resource and biomed, Miss Brown.
Hmm.
Um, and she will, yeah, she'll sometimes be one of the adults on there.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think it's very important for students to know about something like that, because in this weird time, it's hard. It's hard to get out and connect with people, I feel like, and Zoom is one way that makes it easier, and it's still not the same, but having a platform where people can just talk, and I think people don't even realize how much that releases anxieties or other things going on, because if you're just pent up in your room or whatever and focusing on like, oh, AP tests, I just, okay, those just finished, and like having all these other things going on, there's still stuff going on. Not like having just the ability to talk to other people is very, very powerful. And so, yeah, I would suggest people to go to those and just have a place where you can talk to other students, because that's something that we're missing. I'm definitely missing right now, at
Yeah,
least.
for sure. This is the
But
first conversation I've had today.
I know
like,
it's,
it's there's so many opportunities, or there could be so many opportunities for students to be talking to each other, which is why this is great.
yes, exactly. That's why I'm excited about this whole thing, is trying to get people, students and other people as well, to like talk about things that they're passionate about, that they work on, that maybe people don't understand. But like, oh, like there's a lot I didn't know about peer resource, and so it's like I hope other people are equally interested, which I'm sure they will be. And so that's why I'm excited about this, when it's a time when we're kind of craving social interaction. So yeah, I think if people, so the peer resource, the applications are already done. The applications are done,
Yeah,
so
we have a new class.
that's exciting.
It
Uh,
is very exciting.
is like for those applications, or like, is there, how does the process work? Obviously they already happened, but if anyone next year possibly, like, how does it work for people to wanting to apply?
So we, again, it was a whole revamp this year. We had a team that worked on creating new applications. And we have a written application with questions about the applicant, and a lot of the questions, like, I think students might think that there's a specific thing that we're looking for, um, but the applicants that really shone and really proved themselves to be like students that we were interested in having in the class were the ones that spoke completely honestly about themselves. So maybe a student really didn't know what to. We would give. There's a part of the application where we provided like a situation and asked the applicant what they would do, and we had people who were like, I genuinely don't know what to do in this situation, but I want to learn, and that's why I want to be in this class. And so we saw that, and we were like, yeah, that's a person who can recognize their weaknesses, and that's someone we want to see in this class because they will not only be providing to the class, but they can take something away from it too.
Hmm. I think it provides an interesting opportunity for students because there aren't many times in our lives so far that we get to apply for something. I mean, there's people that have
I feel
applied
like
for
I'm applying to
jobs.
things all the time
I
now.
know now it's like
now.
colleges and all that fun stuff, but it's good practice at least. And also, I think it also reveals something important, like just be genuine. Like people reading applications are going to acknowledge when you're being genuine and not trying to be someone you're not. And obviously, I think it's important for you to just be who you are, and then you'll find a fit that's best for you, even if it's something like peer resource, um, or another student thing where it might not be the end all be all. It's like I feel like college is such a big looming thing, like oh, but for all of those applications, just kind of be true to who you are. And I think that's an important lesson takeaway, which I think it's interesting for peer resource as well. And you speaking to that, um, yeah. Also, kind of with the peer resource, it's one of the three leadership classes at Drake. Is that right?
Yeah.
There's ASB, peer resource, and SOAR. Is SOAR the third one?
Yeah.
Um, I know you were just elected as the ASB student board member, so
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you.
I don't know how much you know about SOAR, but I was wondering, like, if you could speak to kind of how they three coexist at Drake, and kind of the different like where their different fields are and how it's kind of how they work together. Um,
So this year we started doing something called PSA, which is an acronym: Peer Resource, SOAR, and ASB. Very fun, and we actually do PSAs.
that's
I
perfect.
think we did two. We did one about vaping, and I think we started doing a couple more just about like treating the school well after there were graffiti incidents. And so I think there was like one day a month during second semester before we got out where we were having meetings with PSA, and there were different groups. I think there was a group that was specifically working on the PSAs, the videos in PTV, so many acronyms. And there was a group that was going to do middle school outreach and teach about what the leadership classes are. And then there was also a group who was working on, I guess, trying to figure out creating conversations about race and about like teen issues and finding a way to discuss things like politics without it just completely blowing up and being like this partisan issue, um, because there are a lot of students who felt like they couldn't have their voices heard because they felt like they would get hate for whatever
Hmm.
they had to say. And I wasn't in that group, so I don't really remember exactly what they had done. I think I was working on the PTVs, uh, but it was kind of cool. Like it would be one Friday a month, and we'd have all the leadership classes get together, and it felt really powerful to see like all these students who are just ambitious and actually wanted to do something.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's awesome because all those people are people that want to be engaged, as you're saying, and so having all those people working together, it's like this power team getting
Yeah.
stuff done. And I definitely saw the PTV, which I remember. I thought that was great, and unique because I feel like as leadership, you don't see them intermingling as much and having these opportunities to say, oh, we are these separate groups, we have different roles, but we also can work together. And it creates this even more powerful message saying, and getting all these powerful minds. You brought up a middle school outreach. I don't I don't know how much you know about that, but when it comes like in high school, how does it like that relationship with middle schoolers? You're also talking about how creating stuff for the incoming freshmen, but obviously we're in the public school system, and there's this connection between middle school, White Hill. So I was wondering if other like peer resource has specific things, or as that PSA, do you know like if there's anything in PR kind of speaking to the middle school aspect of it? Because I think that's definitely not noticed by high schoolers.
I I don't really remember what that group was doing either. But I know when I was in middle school, I think there were a couple times when we had high schoolers come, and it was just so exciting. I was like, oh my God, look at all these older kids! Like they're so cool. Um, and like being that wrapped with these like cool kids, I was like I would listen to anything they had to say. Um, and so I think the PSA kind of wanted to go even as far out into like Lagunitas and Nicasio, because a lot of those kids end up coming to Drake too,
Hmm.
um, and showing that for kids who maybe come from smaller schools, like you have allies within the leadership kids. And even though we might be like scary older kids, we're still here for the younger kids. And we also have a lot of information to provide on like what high school was, because when I came in as an eighth grader or as an incoming freshman, I was a completely different person than I am now. And there was a lot that I wish I had known about like growing throughout high school, um, because I came in and I wasn't really aware that like friendships would change and that like popularity isn't really like a thing, and it's okay if you like don't really have your niche yet,
Hmm.
and you'll eventually find it. And so I think trying to teach that to the middle schoolers, because middle school and high school is so different. Like
Yeah.
just like looking back at middle school, I was like most people changed a lot. And knowing that it's not going to be the same. If you had a bad experience in middle school, that doesn't mean that high school is going to be bad either.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know where you came, but I came from San Domenico, and so that was a difference because I knew a couple people, but it's like I think for like being a freshman, it's all about like becoming comfortable, and obviously some people can be more comfortable coming in than others, and I think mine's a little different. Luckily, I had connections through water polo and swimming, so I had friends there already. Um, but yeah, I think what peer resource and also PSA sounds like what they're doing is very powerful to kind of get the people more comfortable and be like, yes, high school is different. That's okay. And not like worried about like what middle school is like and like changes that go through. So that's great. And you sound like with the freshman orientation stuff, that's also um, very powerful. And I think overall, just having this student body that's in charge of it, because I think as students or like as a younger kid, there's a certain there's almost more reverence to older like high schoolers than there are adults because we're always told what to do by adults, and we see other kids as more as allies. And so if these kids are telling us, it's much more impactful, which I think what you guys are doing in peer resource along with other Drake projects is very, very powerful. So I think that's cool. Um, So yeah, pivoting towards ASB, you, as I mentioned, you were elected student board member, and I'm not exactly sure what that is. So I'd be interested to hear what exactly that role um, details.
So from each school, there is a representative for their school, each school in the TAM district, and they attend board meetings, which I believe are every 2 weeks. And the board makes a lot of decisions that we hear a lot of things, and a lot of students get angry at Drake's admin for like weird rules they have, but a lot of decisions actually come from higher up from the board, and the superintendent. And so this position, um, the students don't, the board, the board votes on things, and the students don't really have a vote in the sense that like the vote is counted towards the final decision, but their vote, they do get a vote in showing the board what they think should happen. So the students might vote on an issue, and all the students might say yay, and the board will take that into consideration when they make their.
Hmm.
And I've never actually been to a board meeting, but I know that there was a big one during the budget issues earlier this semester, um, when there was so many students who were speaking to the board, and then the students on the board helped kind of guide the decision that was made, I think.
And I know I was when the grading policy was happening. I was very interested in what that was happening. So I was watching the board meeting online, um, and I definitely saw students. And now I'm wondering if, and I think there was budget stuff going on as well because of the COVID. So I'm wondering, there definitely probably were some of those student board members, and there might have been other students. I don't know how it works, but that's exciting. And for this role, are you like a part of the ASB class, or is this kind of like, oh, it's part of ASB, but I'm not in the class? It's like it was an elected position, but it's more separate. Um,
You are not necessarily admitted into the ASB class, or at least that's what's been done in the past. And I love my position in peer resource, and you can't currently do ASB and peer resource. They're both during sixth period, so I'm not gonna join ASB because I'm in this. Um, and that's kind of what I really liked about this is it's an elected position and it's ASB elections, but it's kind of like separate from ASB. So it's just like another governing body that students get their voice in.
well, I was just saying how kind of unique the position is because they're making decisions that, like, obviously ASB makes decisions that impact this body, but the like what the but like the board is making is arguably like even more impactful because these big decisions with money or other things. So I think that's a very cool opportunity to be a part of that decision or having some influence. I don't know if you heard, but also just how I hadn't heard of that position before this election season, for that. And yeah, how did you even learn of that position in the first place?
So the current person who holds that position, Maddie, um, she is in one of my classes, and we were having a discussion about it in this class, and she was talking about all the like politics that happen with board meetings, and how like serious a lot of the decisions they made were, um, and it kind of fascinated me to hear about this student who was kind of experiencing these big adult decisions and who had a say in big adult decisions that affect the entire district and all the schools within it. um, and I was like, okay, that's cool, I'm going to run for it. And she's a senior this year. um, I think she's held it for 2 years. Um, and so now that she's going out, I was like, okay, I'm gonna run for this. Um, and so I did.
Cool. That's very unique. And I don't think many people hear of that position. So I think that's very, I don't know, somewhat lucky for you to like, oh, realize this exists and this is something I want to do because yeah, it's not of it's just unique in the sense that you get to be with these people making these important decisions. And I'm wondering, like, how did you connect with the student body when like they're voting on a decision? Because obviously you want to take, I'm assuming you want to take into account what the student body wants or has in mind. And is there a direct thing, or you're like just through general awareness, which I'm sure you could do? But I was wondering if there's like more direct things that you do, like, oh, this is what this. I know Drake wants this. I'm gonna advocate for that. How does that work?
I I really think that it's more kind of like, as a student, I'm in touch with student issues and student opinions, and so I think it's kind of more just like I've immersed myself in the culture of Drake and the student body and take that information. Um, Obviously, I haven't started my position yet, so I'm not really sure what I will do next year.
Hmm.
But I'm also on DLC, which is the site council, and that's kind of just like a smaller. It's like the district board, but of the school, and that's more of a we make decisions, but it's more of a discussion and a way for admin to connect to parents and students. Um, and that's another elected position, but it's not like a big competition. And I don't I don't even think there needed to be an election this year because there were 3 student positions and 3 students applied for it. And so with that, that's really interesting too because we get to hear about admin side of things, like with making decisions. Like for next year is the SLC revamp, um, and so while kids are like freaking out about it and are like, why is this happening? Or there's good opinions, there's bad opinions. Um, admin was like laying out their entire plan to the site council, and so I kind of saw it as it was getting made way back in like October. Um, and so hearing that, I was able to go out and be like, guys, it's okay. There's a plan. It's gonna be fine. It's sad and it's frustrating when something changes, but there's a plan, and we're just gonna see how it goes.
Hmm. And for that, are you part of like decision making, like, or like you have a vote? Like it's kind of similar to what the like main board thing. How does that work? 'Cause I was also not aware of that position.
Yeah, everyone votes. It's kind of more informal. Um, so Chad leads it, and Chad will be like, okay, can I have someone like, so we're gonna vote on something, and usually it's just unanimous,
Hmm.
because it'll be like a student came to site council, asked to put up a mural, and site council has to vote for that. And of course, what are we gonna be like? No, we don't want more art around this school. So everyone was just like, yeah, and that the students do have an actual vote,
And
and
so,
the students were especially like, yes, please, more art.
of course, so that's kind of like decisions specifically around Drake. And I think that's interesting because I feel like most people have the like idea that, oh, it's Miss Seabury, she's the final say or whatever when it comes to like Drake things. But knowing that there's this other like group that this council that makes these decisions, so it's not this figurehead that's all in charge. I think it's probably reassuring for students to know, and also have like you have that unique position to be able to be that intermediary between the board and the student body, because like what you're doing with peer resources, there's this different thing between adults and kids, and like the communication, being able to communicate between adults and kids. And so yeah, I think that's very interesting because I never heard of the Drake site council. um, and then I'm be excited to hear about the board member, the student board member, how that goes. And you're also involved with Surfrider, is that correct? Drake Surfrider?
Yes, I
So
am
many
one of the
things.
presidents.
And I mean, like, you don't have to like give a mission statement, but it can just be like, what does that club do at Drake? Um,
So the Surfrider Foundation, very well known for their environmentalism and their attempts at keeping our oceans clean. And so there's a lot of clubs within the Surfrider Foundation and a lot of student clubs. Even colleges have them. Anyone can start a club from the foundation. You just apply for one. And so ours is mostly like poster campaigns, and we also did a beach cleanup day at the beginning of the year. Um, and our club is mostly freshmen, which is so awesome. They're all amazing and they're super passionate, and they all love the water and love being in the ocean. And so they bring a really great energy in. And so before before Corona, pre-corona, we were trying to do the ocean-friendly restaurants, which is this certification that Surfrider has where your restaurant is certified to be ocean friendly. So you don't have plastic, you don't have styrofoam, you have um, reusable utensil options if you are eating within the restaurants, um, sustainable meats if you're going to have meat, lots of vegan and vegetarian options. And so I got Flowercraft Bakery in San Anselmo and Mill Valley certified with that. And now they have these stickers all over their storefront that says that they're ocean friendly certified. And it's like a membership. The restaurant just pays a fee to Surfrider, and then Surfrider sends all this collateral to them. So they have all this like merch that says ocean friendly water or ocean friendly restaurant.
That's definitely interesting that you get to be involved with that and in the community and being a part of something like Surfrider. Um, and yeah, it's exciting to hear freshmen because I be involved because a lot of times I feel like freshmen are more wary of things, like getting like they're kind of just getting their footing, and so having freshmen be involved in a club that's being involved with the community, um, that's great to hear because when I was a freshman, like I didn't know what I was in club, I wasn't doing anything, and so having people start, I think it's great for people to be getting in, and I'm sure that's you definitely helped. I'm sure you helped get people in too, and being open to freshmen as well. Um, Bridging the gaps between the different grade levels is very impressive, and I think it's just overall a good thing to have. But also, I believe you got to visit. You guys go to Washington D.C., right, with this for the Surfrider Club. So that I'm interested to hear more about that. You met our Congressman Huffman. So if you could just speak to that experience, because it's definitely a unique experience that not many people get to have. So I'm sure I know I am excited to hear about what that was like.
That was like the coolest experience of my year. Like I went and I was like freaking out the entire time. I was like, this is insane. I've never been to Washington D.C. and now I went there. I'm like, oh my god, this is awesome. I want to work here. Um, so our entire trip was funded by the Marin chapter, who we also work really close with. We go to their monthly meetings, and as the students of like Drake and Redwood and Tam, all their clubs help out with stuff that the chapter does and help not necessarily, I wouldn't say make decisions, but like have conversations about, there's not really decisions to be made, but we have conversations about it. And so the chapter funded our trip, which was amazing, and we're so grateful for that because like we bought like plane tickets a month in advance. They were expensive, and we're so lucky that it happened like a month or so before like the travel ban and war shelter in place started. So it's Surfrider Hill Day. They do it every year. I think this is like the third or fifth year, one or the other. And it's like lobbying, but on steroids. Um, there are people, volunteers from all over the country, as well as like chapter and regional employees for Surfrider. And we had a little lobbying seminar where we were taught like here's how to basically make a pitch to the Congress people, and here's like how to get your message across. And because we live in such an area where like climate change is accepted, it really wasn't hard to be making our pitches to our Congress people. Like I think everyone we spoke to was within the Bay Area, and so everyone was very understanding and was happy to support a list of bills that we gave them. We got to meet with one of Nancy Pelosi's employees, which was really cool. And I think like the most inspiring part for me was the fact that like everyone we met with was under the age of 25. Like so many of the staffers within Congress are really young, like fresh out of college or even in college. And so seeing that, and a lot of them were women too. And so seeing that was like really inspiring. I was like, okay, I could do this. Um, and so it was really nice to see that kind of representation within the government. Oftentimes we see just the face, but for each congressperson or for each like politician, there's an entire team behind them, and oftentimes that team is just made of everyday people.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know. I think it's also kind of inspiring to hear that now that like maybe it's not perfect yet the in Congress or wherever, or the politicians be as diverse as it possibly could be, but having it start to be like in their um, like staffers and having more diversity in that, I think it's definitely moving in the right direction at least. So that's exciting to hear, and also you having the like opportunity to go and talk with these people, and it's another way of like having people our age like connect with adults and kind of being that intermediary for what students want for these adults. So I think, yeah, it's impressive and also very exciting and cool opportunity. Um, and yeah, so overall, it seems like you've got a lot going on, lots of um, different things, connecting students or connecting students and adults. Um, so I'm sure you'll continue to be busy.
Yep. Even in Corona.
Even in Corona, you still got stuff to go. It's good go and do. But yeah, thank you so much for being on. This was a lot of interesting stuff came up that I didn't even know existed. So that was exciting.
Oh, I'm glad I could inform.
Of course, and the things are like also important things that people should know about, like peer mentoring, and now I continue to see was like that's something people should know about, and then also like the DLC, like have knowing that it exists and not like it's just the administration, like their student involvement. I think it's also important. But yeah, this was very informative. Thank you so much, and I hope your quarantine is as exciting as it possibly can be.
Thank you. You too, Isaiah.